Food and drink manufacturers were advised to engage with Brexit at today's Food Safety Conference. I'm Mike Stones for Food Manufacture, and I pursued that point with the man who gave it, Dominic Watkins, partner with DWF. Dominic, what does engaging with Brexit look like for food manufacturers?
I think this is going to really depend business to business. So if we go back to January this year at the Business Leaders event, where we heard the challenges of getting people into the food sector. We've heard about businesses looking outside of the UK to the EU and beyond for their employees. So if what we're now hearing about having to create lists and other challenges and the free movement being removed, that could create fundamental challenges for where the workforce comes from. So we need to make sure these issues that really affect the sector are being heard by government so that they can be taken into account.
How can food manufacturers plan for Brexit before Theresa May triggers Article 50 and when there are so many pressing questions?
Well, the key thing is identifying where the opportunities and risks are. So we can all look at the big picture. We all know that Article 50 is going to be triggered in March of next year. We understand that potentially going to be a letter setting out our negotiating position. That's wonderful. But what about the detail? What about those things that affect us in our day-to-day operation of our business? How are they going to get to us? Where are the opportunities here? Where are the risks? So let's think about what we saw with FIC and the change of food labelling. I mean, the numbers changed dramatically, but something like £3,000 to £5,000 a label. Well, every SKU is going to need to be changed again post-Brexit. Just one little example. Extrapolate that across every area of regulation. It's a huge challenge, but also an opportunity.
But what about the implications for labour? I'm thinking particularly of the 100,000 non-UK EU nationals that currently work in the UK food and drink sector.
Well, people are the lifeblood of the sector, and it's been a real challenge to get labour into the industry, and so we're going to see that challenge continue, particularly in the wake of removal of the free movement, working in both directions. We may see impacts on people moving to Europe because they don't want to have multiple production lines doing different things. We need consistency, we need certainty. Right now we need information to be able to plan for the future. If we don't know what the future is going to bring, how can we plan for it? How can we be prepared and advise our respective businesses, whether it's in a service industry or whether it's producing, what the future is going to hold and how to prepare for it?
So what are the key questions for food and drink manufacturers that you want Prime Minister Theresa May to answer?
Well, one of the first questions is what do we mean by transposing the EU law into the UK law? What does that look like? Are we talking about cutting and pasting? Are we talking about lists? Because that's a big difference here. If we're saying transposition means simply a list of EU law that will continue to have effect, well, that can't be satisfactory because it means we don't have control over what is going on. But if we're doing copying and pasting, where are we going to go through every single one of those regulations to make sure all the cross-references work and everything else is operating? So we need that bit of detail to start with. But then where can they add value? How can they help the government create the effective and more attractive market that they're so desperately looking to do? Where the business needs to identify the opportunities for them and start having those conversations with central government to make sure that they capitalise on the opportunity and not just see it as a risk.
So we know about the challenges of Brexit. What are the potential bright sides?
Well, it's going to vary depending on who you are. So you could have the removal of things like tariffs and quotas potentially. So we would no longer be part of the EU system. So you'd have an opportunity for the UK market to grow. So there's a chance there, for example, for meats or for other products that are subject to those issues. There would also be opportunity to perhaps deregulate things like health claims to make the system work more effectively. There's obviously been a huge amount of challenge in marketing claims around health claims over the last few years. Well, we could move in perhaps a more business and consumer friendly fashion at the same time. I think the unintended consequence of health claims, you end up with lots of generic claims that mean nothing to any consumer or to any business. But if you could move back to phraseology that actually describes these things in a way that consumers can understand and is scientifically accurate, well, that might be a huge win for everybody.
So tell me, Dominic, how is the government going to untie the Gordian knot of balancing access to 500 million EU consumers on the one hand with restricting the ability of non-UK EU nationals to work in this country on the other hand?
Well, I think if we know the answer, we best tell government, because they don't seem to have one right now. But more seriously, I think it's a real difficult practical problem. We rely on a migrant workforce to an extent, and we need that migrant workforce to bring the best quality and best talent into the UK. So there has to be an effective system of immigration or migration to allow the best talent to create industry to grow. Same time, we also need to invest in training and education of our young people to draw them into sectors like the food sector to ensure that there is a generation of talent coming through. But we've seen for all the efforts the industry's put in over the last decade, that's really difficult to do. And I don't see how Brexit is going to really help things in the short term. How they work this through? Well, I think they've got a big challenge ahead. And simply just dealing with logistics is a real headache. Simply to work out, well, what are we going to do with these 12,295 regulations that I keep hearing being mentioned? If this is the scale of the task, just simply one page of regulation is going to take forever to work through. And of course, there are many orders of magnitude greater than that. So we need to sit down, we need to understand what the implications are, what the consequences are, and where the opportunities and risks are for the sector. And right now, the government is dealing with things at a big picture level, not at that level of detail.
Dominic Watkins, partner with DWF, thank you for that snapshot tour of Brexit's dark side and also some of its brighter prospects for food and drink manufacturers. I'm Mike Stones for Food Manufacture.